I was on a road trip from northern Oregon to southern Arizona to meet my family for a few days around Christmas. Since it was a long drive, I rented an Airbnb halfway through the trip. I didn't need anything fancy. I just needed a place to sleep for one night. I found the cheapest place I could, right in the middle of Nevada. It wasn't near any town or city, but it was only about a mile off the highway, so it seemed perfect. I left early that morning and arrived just as the sun was going down. The area was nothing but forest and empty land. I didn't see many houses or buildings at all. After driving for a while, my phone told me to turn onto a small dirt road. There were no lights, no signs, nothing to show a road was even there. I drove slowly for the entire mile until I reached the cabin. The cabin was much bigger than I expected. The listing didn't show any photos of the outside, and it said it was a one-bedroom cabin, so I thought it would be small. I parked right in front. The forest around the cabin was thick and dark, and I could hear animals making noise as night came. I walked up to the door and nearly had a heart attack when it suddenly opened. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you," a man said, smiling way too wide. I froze. I had no idea who he was or why he was there. He said his name was Mark and that he was the owner of the Airbnb. I must have looked confused because then he said, "Your room is right this way." That's when I realized the truth. I hadn't rented the whole cabin. I had rented a room inside it. I couldn't believe I made that mistake. I didn't remember the listing saying it was shared, but at the moment, I felt stuck. It was late, the place was isolated, and I was only staying one night. So I followed him inside. He walked me down a long hallway to the very last room at the end. The hallway was very dark. There were no lights at all. He gave me a key for the front door and another for the bedroom, smiled again and said, "Enjoy." Then he walked away. I closed the bedroom door and dropped my bag on the bed. I felt uncomfortable being alone in the middle of nowhere with a stranger, but I told myself it was just one night. I planned to sleep and leave early in the morning. As I unpacked, there was a knock on the door. I jumped. I never heard him walk up. I opened the door slightly, and Mark was standing there, smiling the same strange smile. He asked if I liked the room. I said yes, just to be polite. He told me to let him know if I needed anything and stood there for a few seconds too long before finally walking away. I locked the door. Something about him felt wrong. Maybe he was just trying too hard to be friendly, but it didn't feel real. It felt fake. I stayed in the room for about half an hour, scrolling on my phone and listening. Eventually, I heard the TV turn on in the living room, and I relaxed a little. I brushed my teeth and got in the shower. The bathroom was old and gross. The shower curtain was one of those blurry, see-through ones. After about a minute, I heard a soft thump from outside the room. I stopped and listened. Then, for just a second, I thought I saw a shadow move through the curtain. I quickly pulled it open, but nothing was there. I finished showering fast. When I walked back into the bedroom, my heart dropped. The door was slightly open. I knew I had locked it. I slammed it shut and locked it again. My hands were shaking. Someone had opened my door while I was in the shower. I grabbed my phone and opened the Airbnb app. I checked the listing again. There were only 3 reviews, all 5 stars, but now they looked fake. Then, I noticed something even worse. The listing said it was a standalone cabin, not a shared space. I knew I had to leave. I packed my bag quickly and pressed my ear to the door. I could still hear the TV playing in the living room. Then I heard something else. Soft, rough breathing. It was coming from inside the room. Slowly, I turned around. The sound was coming from the closet. I didn't think. I threw the door open and ran. The living room was empty. I ran straight to my car and drove as fast as I could down the dirt road until I reached the highway. I called my mom while shaking and crying. She told me to report it to the police, which I did. Nothing serious came from it. There wasn't enough proof. The only thing the man got in trouble for was listing the Airbnb incorrectly. And one last thing, Mark wasn't even his real name. The listing was removed, and I never saw it again. I still think about what could have happened if I stayed that night.
I lived alone in a small cabin in the woods in northern Pennsylvania. It was about 30 minutes from the nearest town. The place was quiet, peaceful, and comfortable. I had lived there for 8 years, and in all that time, I had never seen or heard anyone else nearby. One morning, I didn't have anything to do, so I went for a walk around my land. I didn't follow a trail. I knew the area well, so I just walked through the trees, enjoying the forest. That's when I found something strange. About 300 or 400 feet behind my cabin, I saw the remains of a campsite. There was a burnt pile of ashes from a campfire and a flat area where a tent had clearly been set up. From that spot, I could see my cabin through the trees. That's how close it was. Whoever had camped there knew they were on someone's land. It felt intentional, like they wanted to be close. I walked around more, looking for other signs of someone being there, but I didn't find anything else, just that one campsite. I couldn't understand how I had never noticed it before. I guess after so many years of being alone, I never thought to check. The rest of the day was quiet. That night, I looked out the windows, but I didn't see any lights or fires. The next few days were normal. Then on Saturday night, I was sitting on my back porch having a few drinks and enjoying the calm forest. That's when I saw it, an orange glow flickering between the trees. It was coming from the same place where I found the campsite. I knew right away it was a campfire. I stood up and decided to walk over there. I wanted to confront whoever was there and tell them this was my property. I planned to stay calm and friendly. I even thought about letting them finish camping for the night. I should have brought a flashlight. As I walked closer, I could barely see anything except the glow of the fire. When I reached the campsite, my stomach dropped. No one was there. The fire was burning, and a tent was set up, but the place was empty. Whoever was there had left just moments before. That made me realize something awful. They had probably been watching me and hid when they saw me coming. I started looking around, panicked, but everything around me was dark and full of shadows. I couldn't see anyone. It suddenly felt way too dangerous to stay there. I turned and hurried back toward my cabin. I wanted my phone so I could call the police, but when I reached the open area near my cabin, I stopped cold. My front door was wide open. That's when I understood. Whoever was camping had gone into my cabin while I was distracted. I felt trapped. I didn't have my phone. I didn't have my car keys. I was standing in the open with nowhere to hide. I slowly walked toward the cabin. I noticed all the lights inside were now turned off. The place was completely dark. I stood at the door and looked inside. "Who's in there?" I called out. No answer. After a few seconds, I stepped inside. My heart was pounding so loud it felt like I could hear it in my ears. My car keys were on a small table near the kitchen. My phone was in the bedroom, farther away. I decided to grab the keys and run. I moved quickly toward the table. That's when I saw him. A man was standing in the dark corner of the kitchen, watching me. I turned and ran. I heard his heavy footsteps right behind me. I slammed the front door shut and sprinted to my car. I started it and began backing out. He didn't stop. He ran up to my car and grabbed the door handle. He managed to pull it open slightly, but I hit the gas and got away just in time. I drove straight to the police station in town. The whole drive, I couldn't stop thinking about how close I came to being caught, and that the man was still back at my cabin. After a long wait, an officer came back with news that made everything worse. The man had tried to burn my cabin down. They found the fireplace roaring, packed with so much wood that flames were spreading into the living room. It was pure luck that the cabin didn't fully catch fire before police and firefighters stopped it. The only thing left behind was the ashes from the campsite. The man was gone. Knowing he had tried to hurt me and that he may have been watching me for days or even weeks was terrifying. I never learned who he was or why he targeted me. I never spent another night in that cabin. I hired movers and relocated far away. The investigation went on for months, but nothing came of it. To this day, I don't know what that man planned to do or how much worse it could have been. This happened a few years ago, when I was 23 years old. I rented a cabin because I wanted a quiet, stress-free vacation. I went alone. The cabin was in a wooded area of western Montana, far from any towns. It was early winter, about 2 weeks after Christmas, so it was the off-season. Because of that, the price was really cheap. When I arrived, the first thing I noticed was how silent it was. If you haven't been somewhere remote in a long time, the quiet feels strange. It's calm, but also uncomfortable. It makes you realize how alone you really are. The cabin looked exactly like the pictures online. It was simple and a little old, but cozy. I unpacked slowly, made an easy dinner, and spent the night reading by the fireplace. Nothing strange happened. I slept well and woke up feeling great. The next morning, I made breakfast and coffee. I stayed inside all morning and part of the afternoon, but eventually I got bored. Near the front door, I noticed a hand-drawn map on the wall. It showed a walking trail behind the cabin. The owner, Evan, had written that it was an easy trail, only a couple of miles long. It looked like a loop through the woods. I put on my jacket and went outside. Right away, I could tell the trail wasn't well taken care of. It was overgrown and hard to follow. It looked like Evan may have made it years ago and never fixed it again. About halfway through the trail, I noticed something strange. There was another path splitting off from the main one. On the map inside the cabin, there was only one trail, not two. I didn't see anything down the second path, but I was curious. I had nothing else to do, so I decided to follow it. For about 5 minutes, I saw nothing. I couldn't understand why the path was even there. Then I reached an area covered in thick bushes. I pushed through them and froze. At the end of the path was another cabin. It was old, broken down, and covered in moss. Parts of it were rotting. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Seeing it so close to the cabin I was staying in made my skin crawl. I walked closer and looked inside. The door was missing. The inside looked just as bad as the outside. Everything was ruined and smelled like mold and decay. Dust covered the floor. But one thing stood out. There were footprints in the dust. They looked recent, like someone had been there not long ago. I told myself it was probably another renter from the past who had explored, like I did. But then something caught my eye. In the corner of the cabin, there was a doorway. The room beyond it was completely black. No windows, no light, just darkness. Out of the corner of my eye, I was sure I saw something move inside that dark doorway. I panicked. I turned around and ran back down the trail as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I reached my rental cabin. I locked the door behind me. I couldn't explain it, but I felt strongly that something bad had happened in that other cabin, or was still happening. I knew I wasn't going back there. I texted Evan and told him I found an old cabin on the trail. I expected him to say it was abandoned and nothing to worry about. An hour later, he replied with just one sentence: "There are no other cabins in the woods." That made my stomach drop. I didn't know how to respond. I had seen the cabin. His message made it feel like he was denying it on purpose, or trying to make me doubt myself. I didn't text him back. As the afternoon went on, I slowly calmed down. By night, I almost convinced myself it was just an old, forgotten building. Nothing more. I made dinner, had a few drinks, and sat by the fireplace. It was around 11 p.m. when the feeling came back. Suddenly, my stomach tightened. That deep, awful gut feeling returned all at once. I stood up and looked around. The cabin was quiet. I went to the window and looked outside. The woods were completely still. No wind, no animals, no sound at all. The calmness felt wrong. I stared toward the trail entrance behind the cabin. After a few minutes, I heard it. Leaves crunching, sticks snapping. Someone was walking outside. I followed the sound toward the front door. I heard footsteps step onto the porch, then silence. Instead of calling the police right away, I texted Evan. I asked if someone was supposed to be there. The moment I sent the message, I heard a phone notification sound right outside the door. My blood ran cold. Evan was outside, but why didn't he text me first? Why was he standing there in silence? Before I could think any more, I called 911. For several minutes after that, I stood frozen, knowing he was still outside the door. I was terrified, because I knew he had a key. But he never came in. It felt like he was deciding whether or not to do something. Eventually, I heard footsteps leave the porch. The police arrived shortly after. I told them everything and showed them the texts. They went to Evan's main house, but he wasn't there. He didn't answer his phone either. Later, when they finally spoke to him, he denied everything. He said he was never at the cabin. The police told me the whole situation was suspicious, but without evidence, they couldn't do much. I don't know what was really going on out there. Maybe I shouldn't have explored the trail, but I know one thing for sure: if I had gone any deeper into that second cabin, things could have ended much worse.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe, or follow for more stories on Fun Tales for All.